My name is Harley, 32 years old, and I make six figures climbing power poles for a living. Growing up with an engineering professor for a father meant my career choice was never respected. Last Christmas, I spent $30,000 on his dream car, a restored '67 Mustang GT. His response? He called me an idiot who just climbs poles for a living while everyone laughed. What he didn't expect was what happened the next morning, when I showed him what real power looks like. Before I dive into this story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had someone underestimate your worth. My relationship with my father, Victor, has always been complicated. From my earliest memories, he made it clear that academic achievement was the only path to success in his world. As a tenured engineering professor at one of the most prestigious universities in the Northeast, he measured everyone by their degrees and academic pedigree. Growing up in our upper-middle-class suburb outside Boston, the pressure was constant. My bedroom walls weren't decorated with sports posters like my friends' rooms. Instead, they displayed framed academic achievement certificates and a giant periodic table my father insisted would seep into my subconscious. Every report card was scrutinized at the dinner table, with each A questioned as to why it wasn't an A+. The Matthews boy got accepted to Princeton, he would announce casually during dinner. His father tells me he's planning to double major in physics and electrical engineering. The unspoken comparison hung in the air like a heavy cloud. My mother, Elaine, always played peacekeeper. A former literature professor who gave up her career to raise us, she understood me in ways my father never tried to. Late at night, after particularly brutal criticism sessions with my father, she would slip into my room with hot chocolate and reassurances. "Your father loves you, Harley," she'd whisper. "He just shows it by pushing you. He wants you to have every advantage he didn't have growing up." What neither of them understood was that I wasn't wired for theoretical equations or abstract concepts. My mind worked in tangible systems, things I could touch, fix, improve with my hands. While my father saw mathematical beauty in the theoretical concept of electrical engineering, I found satisfaction in actually working with electrical systems, understanding them through physical connection rather than formulas on a page. By high school, the disconnect was obvious. I maintained decent grades, mostly B's, with occasional, as in practical subjects, but nothing that would impress a man whose office showcased framed correspondence with Nobel laureates. Meanwhile, I spent weekends helping my Uncle Brian, my mother's brother, restore old cars and work on household electrical projects. Those were the only times I felt truly competent and alive. The real breaking point came during my senior year. College application season turned our home into a war zone. My father had mapped out applications to 14 elite universities, with MIT and Stanford at the top of the list. My guidance counselor had gently suggested this might be unrealistic given my solid but unspectacular academic record. When the rejection letters started arriving, each one felt like another nail in the coffin of my relationship with my father. His disappointment manifested as cold silence for days, broken only by occasional sighs and rhetorical questions about where we went wrong. The final blow came when I announced my decision to attend a 2-year technical program for electrical linework, instead of accepting my only admission to a mid-tier state university. "You're throwing away your future," my father declared, his voice eerily calm but vibrating with anger. "Do you have any idea what people would give for the opportunities you've had? And you want to climb poles for a living?" "It's more than climbing poles," I tried explaining. "It's essential infrastructure work. The power grid it's manual labor," he interrupted. "I didn't put you through private school, so you could do a job that requires nothing more than a strong back and an empty head." That night, I heard my parents arguing about me for hours. My mother defending my choice, my father lamenting his failed parenting. Meanwhile, my younger sister Bethany sat in her room, probably studying. 3 years behind me in school, she had already established herself as the academic star I never was. Perfect GPA, science competition trophies, early acceptance to Cornell Engineering. With a scholarship, she was everything my father wanted in a child. The next 4 years drove the wedge deeper between us. While I completed my technical training and began my apprenticeship with the power company, Bethany collected Latin honors and research fellowships. Family gatherings became showcases for her achievements, with my work mentioned as an afterthought, if at all. "And how's your job, Harley?" my father would ask, The pause before job speaking volumes. What my father never bothered to learn was how challenging and technical my work actually was. The apprenticeship was intensely competitive, 36 positions with over 800 applicants. The training combined electrical theory, mechanical engineering principles, safety protocols, and physical endurance. During severe weather, we worked around the clock in dangerous conditions that would send most office workers running for cover. By my late 20s, I had established myself as one of the top linemen in the Northeast region. My skills and reliability earned me the best shifts and plenty of overtime opportunities. While my father assumed I was scraping by on a blue-collar salary, I was actually earning well into six figures with my overtime and hazard pay, more than many of the fresh PhDs he taught. I bought my own house at 27, a comfortable 3-bedroom on 2 acres outside the city. I never mentioned the purchase to my father. What was the point? He'd find some way to diminish it, to compare it unfavorably with Bethany's life choices. Instead, I built my own support network. My crew members became like family. We understood each other, respected the dangers we faced together, celebrated our victories, keeping communities powered through impossible conditions. My supervisor, Thomas, became something of a mentor, the kind of leader who recognized practical intelligence and work ethic over credentials. Holiday gatherings remained painful exercises in endurance. Each Thanksgiving and Christmas followed the same pattern. Extensive discussion of Bethany's latest academic paper or professional achievement, followed by cursory questions about my job situation. Asked with the same tone, one might inquire about a persistent rash. Last year's Christmas was particularly brutal. Bethany had just been hired by a prestigious engineering firm in Manhattan, and her new husband Travis was finishing his medical residency. The dinner conversation revolved entirely around their plans to purchase a brownstone and Bethany's new company car. "And what about you, Harley? Still doing the same?" "Work?" my father asked while passing the mashed potatoes. "Yes, still keeping the lights on for everyone," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "Well, I suppose someone has to," he said with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. The conversation immediately pivoted back to Bethany's upcoming conference presentation in Tokyo. That night, driving back to my hotel room, I always stayed at a hotel rather than my childhood bedroom during these visits, I made a decision. For 32 years, I'd been seeking approval I would never receive. It was time to try something dramatic, either to bridge the gap once and for all, or to accept that it would never be crossed. The idea came from an offhand comment my mother made during one of our weekly phone calls in February. We were discussing my father's upcoming 65th birthday, and she mentioned his recent obsession with classic car restoration shows. "He keeps talking about this '67 Mustang GT he almost bought right after graduate school," she told me. "Apparently he found one for sale, but used the money for a down payment on our first house instead. He says it's his only financial regret." Something clicked in my mind. Here was a tangible way to show my father that my pole climbing job had given me the means to fulfill his long-abandoned dream. Maybe, just maybe, this grand gesture would finally earn his respect. The search began immediately. I reached out to classic car collectors, joined online forums, and set up alerts on auction sites. Finding the right car specifically, a 1967 Mustang GT Fastback in Highland Green, proved more difficult than I anticipated. When I finally located one in decent condition in Arizona, the asking price made me wince, $23,000, and it still needed significant restoration work. For the next 8 months, I picked up every overtime shift available. 14-hour days, weekend work, volunteering for the most remote and difficult assignments that came with premium pay. My crew noticed the change in my usual schedule. "You saving up for a yacht or something?" joked Kevin, my usual climbing partner, as we finished a grueling 16-hour shift restoring power after a thunderstorm. "Something like that," I replied, too tired to elaborate. By June, I had saved enough to purchase the car and have it transported to my friend Jake's garage. Jake, a mechanic with a passion for American muscle cars, agreed to help with the restoration. "This is going to be one hell of a project," he whistled after inspecting the Mustang. "Engine needs rebuilding, interior shot, and there's rust in places I don't even want to talk about." "Can we have it done by Christmas?" I asked. Jake scratched his beard thoughtfully. "With enough money and time, anything's possible. But it'll cost you." And cost me it did. Every spare dollar and minute went into that car. I consulted with restoration specialists about historically accurate details. I sourced original parts from collectors across the country. When the correct seat upholstery pattern proved impossible to find, I paid a custom upholsterer an exorbitant sum to recreate it from photographs. My social life evaporated. Friends stopped calling after I declined enough invitations. Dating became non-existent. Who would want to date someone who disappeared into a garage every night and weekend? I even skipped Thanksgiving with the family, claiming an emergency work situation, when in reality I was helping Jake install the rebuilt engine. Through the exhaustion and financial strain, I kept visualizing the moment my father would see the car. The look of shock on his face. The realization that his underachieving son had accomplished something meaningful. The pride that might finally replace the perpetual disappointment in his eyes. By mid-December, the transformation was complete. The Highland green paint gleamed under the garage lights. The chrome sparkled. The rebuilt V8 engine purred with a deep, satisfying rumble that vibrated through your chest. It wasn't just restored, it was perfect. "You outdid yourself," Jake said, wiping grease from his hands as we admired our work. "This is museum quality." "Worth every penny," I replied, running my hand along the sleek hood. The total investment had ballooned to just over $30,000, about half my annual take-home pay. I coordinated the surprise with my mother, who was practically giddy with excitement. "He talks about that car all the time while watching those restoration shows," she confided. "He'll be speechless." The plan was set for Christmas Day. I would drive the Mustang to my parents' house early, hide it down the street, then reveal it after the family dinner and gift exchange. My mother suggested putting the key in a small box for him to open first. "It's perfect," she assured me. "This will change everything." On Christmas Eve, I carefully washed and detailed the Mustang one final time, then covered it with a custom car cover for the drive to my parents' town. The weather forecast called for clear conditions, a small miracle for New England in December. As I set out early Christmas morning for the 3-hour drive, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. This gesture represented more than just an expensive gift. It was my last, best effort to bridge the chasm between my father and me. To show him that my path, though different from what he'd planned, had led to success on my own terms. The Mustang handled beautifully on the highway, drawing admiring glances from other drivers. Each mile closer to my parents' house built my anticipation. By the time I parked the car around the corner from their suburban colonial, my heart was pounding with nervous energy. This was it. After decades of disapproval and dismissal, I was about to show my father that the son he considered a disappointment had become successful enough to make his dreams come true. My parents' house looked like something from a holiday catalog, as it did every Christmas. My mother's meticulous decorating transformed the already elegant colonial into a showcase of tasteful holiday spirit. Wreaths adorned each window. Garlands wrapped the staircase banisters. The 15-foot tree in the living room, always professionally decorated in that year's chosen theme, dominated the front window. This year's color scheme was silver and blue, giving the entire house a wintry, sophisticated atmosphere. I parked my regular truck in the driveway, having left the Mustang hidden around the block. The gift box with the car key was wrapped in silver paper and tucked safely in my jacket pocket. Taking a deep breath, I approached the front door, gift bags for everyone else hanging from my arm. My mother answered my knock with her characteristic enthusiasm, pulling me into a tight hug that smelled of cinnamon and her signature perfume. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," she exclaimed. "Everyone's already here. Come in, come in." The house was filled with the extended family, my mother's siblings and their spouses, a few cousins, and of course, Bethany and her husband Travis. The living room buzzed with conversation, and Christmas music played softly from hidden speakers. My father stood by the fireplace, drink in hand, deep in conversation with Uncle Brian. He looked up as I entered, his expression shifting from animation to his typical reserved acknowledgement of my presence. "Harley," he nodded. "Glad you could make it." No hug, no handshake, just the same distant greeting I'd received for years. I returned the nod and moved toward Uncle Brian, who gave me a warm handshake and genuine smile. "How's life on the high wires, kid?" he asked. At least Uncle Brian showed interest in my work, even if his understanding of what I actually did was somewhat vague. "No complaints," I replied. "How's the body shop?" Before he could answer, my sister Bethany approached, perfect as always in a designer sweater and immaculate makeup. Her husband Travis followed like an accessory, his surgeon's hands clasped around a glass of my father's expensive scotch. "Finally made it, huh?" Bethany smiled, giving me a quick side hug. "We were just telling Dad about our offer on that brownstone. The location is absolutely perfect walking distance to Travis's hospital and right near Central Park." "Sounds great," I said, forcing enthusiasm. "Congratulations." My father jumped in. "The neighborhood is extremely exclusive. They were incredibly lucky to find anything under $2 million in that area. Bethany's firm actually helped with the financing as part of her signing package." And so it began, the familiar pattern of Bethany's accomplishments taking center stage. I drifted toward the kitchen, where my mother was coordinating the final dinner preparations with Aunt Susan. "Need any help?" I offered. My mother smiled gratefully. "Would you mind bringing out the wine? We're almost ready to seat everyone." Dinner was served in the formal dining room, where the table had been extended to accommodate all 16 family members. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, and the good china only used for Christmas and Thanksgiving was set with precision. My place card, as usual, placed me far from my father, who sat at the head of the table with Bethany and Travis to his immediate right. Throughout the elaborate meal, conversation flowed around me but rarely included me. My cousin Adam discussed his recent promotion at his investment bank. Aunt Patricia detailed her volunteer work chairing the Symphony fundraiser. Bethany and Travis described their recent vacation to the Maldives, complete with underwater bungalows. When asked about my year, I kept it brief, knowing from experience that detailed descriptions of power grid maintenance or emergency storm response would elicit polite but disinterested nods. "Work's been busy. We had that major ice storm in February that kept us working around the clock." "Oh yes, we lost power for almost 6 hours," my father commented. "Quite inconvenient during midterm preparations." No acknowledgement that I had spent 72 hours straight in freezing conditions, risking my life to restore that power. Just annoyance at the inconvenience. After dinner came the annual gift exchange. We gathered in the living room, where presents were methodically distributed and opened one at a time, with appropriate exclamations of delight, regardless of the gift's actual appeal. My father received a cashmere sweater from Bethany and Travis, rare whiskey from Uncle Brian, and an antique fountain pen from my mother. My gifts to everyone else were opened and acknowledged carefully selected items I'd ordered online, lacking the personal touch of Bethany's perfectly wrapped presents. I received the usual assortment of gift cards and clothing items selected by assistants or personal shoppers. Finally, as the exchange wound down, I pulled the small silver box from my pocket. My mother caught my eye from across the room and gave an encouraging nod. "Dad," I said, my voice slightly unsteady, "I have one more gift for you." The room quieted as I handed him the small box. He accepted it with a raised eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by its size. "Quite small this year," he commented, carefully removing the wrapping paper and opening the box. His confusion was evident as he lifted out the car key with the distinctive Mustang logo. "A key?" he asked, examining it. "To what exactly?" This was my moment. I stood up, feeling everyone's eyes on me. "You'll need to come outside to see." A murmur of curiosity rippled through the room as everyone rose to follow us. My mother clasped her hands together in barely contained excitement. Even Bethany looked genuinely intrigued. I led the procession through the front door and gestured down the driveway. "It's just around the corner. Follow me." As we walked down the sidewalk, I could hear speculative whispers behind me. My heart pounded in my chest. This was the moment I'd worked and sacrificed for all year, the moment that would finally change my father's perception of me. When we turned the corner and the Mustang came into view, gleaming under the winter sunlight, there was a collective gasp. But the only reaction I cared about was my father's. For just a moment, one beautiful, fleeting moment, I saw it, pure, unfiltered joy spreading across his face. His eyes widened, his lips parted in genuine surprise, and he stopped walking entirely, as if his body couldn't process the shock. "Is that?" he started, his voice uncharacteristically unsteady. "A 1967 Mustang GT Fastback. Highland Green," I confirmed, unable to keep the pride from my voice. "Fully restored to factory specifications. The exact model you always wanted." He approached the car slowly, running his hand along the hood with reverence. "How did you?" He couldn't even complete the sentence. "Merry Christmas, Dad," I said, holding out the key to him. "It's yours." The gathered family erupted in excited comments. My mother had tears in her eyes. For that perfect moment, I felt like I had finally done something worthy in my father's eyes. The moment of joy was heartbreakingly brief. My father circled the car, his initial amazement quickly giving way to his habitual critical assessment. He knelt to examine the undercarriage, ran his fingers along the door seams, and peered closely at the engine through the hood vents. "The paint is a shade off from the original Highland green," he commented, his voice returning to its familiar professorial tone. "And these aren't the correct wheel caps for a 67. They look like 68 models." I felt my stomach tighten. I had personally verified the paint code with 3 different restoration specialists. The wheel caps had been sourced from a collector in Michigan who guaranteed their authenticity. But before I could explain any of this, Uncle Brian stepped forward. "This is incredible, Harley," he said, genuinely impressed. "Must have cost a fortune. How did you manage to afford something like this?" It was an innocent question, asked with real admiration, but it opened the door to what came next. My father straightened up, looking at me with a strange expression, something between surprise and disdain. Then he laughed. Not a warm laugh of appreciation, but a short, dismissive chuckle. "That's actually a good question," he said, looking around at the gathered family. "How does an idiot who climbs poles for a living afford a car like this? Must be drowning in debt." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen, the happy ending I'd imagined crumbling before my eyes. "Victor!" my mother gasped, but my father was on a roll now. "Seriously, I'm curious. What does a glorified telephone repairman make these days?" Couldn't be much. Certainly not enough for this kind of extravagance. A few uncomfortable chuckles came from the group. My cousin Adam jumped in, his investment banker confidence boosted by several glasses of wine. "Maybe there's good money in monkey work these days," he snickered, "though I can't imagine climbing around in the snow beats a corner office." More laughter, less uncomfortable now. My father's permission to mock had opened the floodgates. "Remember when we were kids and you said you wanted to be an astronaut?" Bethany added, her tone dripping with condescension. "I guess you still ended up in a high-risk profession, just without the education requirements." The laughter grew. I stood there, keys still in my outstretched hand, as my family, the people I'd hoped would finally see my worth, laughed at my career, my choices, my life. My father took the keys finally, but his expression wasn't grateful. It was smug, as if my gift merely confirmed his long-held belief in my inferiority. "Well, it's certainly a nice car," he said, in the tone he might use to praise a child's crayon drawing. "Though I question the financial wisdom of someone in your position making such a purchase. But then again, long-term planning was never your strong suit, was it?" The burning in my face spread down my neck. I could feel every heartbeat pounding in my temples. The pristine white snow around us seemed suddenly harsh and blinding. "I spent months restoring it," I managed to say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "I'm sure you did your best," my father replied with a dismissive wave. "Though these things are really best left to professionals, I can already spot several amateur mistakes." Uncle Brian, perhaps sensing how deeply the comments were cutting, tried to change the subject. "The craftsmanship looks top-notch to me. Must have taken incredible dedication." But my father wasn't finished. He turned to address the whole family, keys dangling casually from his finger. "You know, this is actually quite representative of Harley's approach to life. Grand gestures without proper planning or execution. If he'd put this much effort into his education, he might have had a real career instead of a job any high school dropout could do." The casual cruelty of his words hung in the frigid air. My sister at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, though she said nothing in my defense. My mother placed a hand on my father's arm, which he shrugged off. "We should get back inside," he announced. "It's freezing out here, and I want to check the game score." Just like that, my $30,000 gesture, my year of sacrifice, my desperate attempt at connection, all dismissed as the foolish act of someone not smart enough to know better. The family began drifting back toward the house, a few casting sympathetic glances my way, but none brave enough to contradict my father. As they disappeared around the corner, I remained standing beside the Mustang, the car that was supposed to change everything but had instead only reinforced the unbridgeable gap between us. The cold began seeping through my jacket, but I barely noticed. Something else was crystallizing inside me, A cold, clear certainty that nothing I ever did would be enough. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my mother. "I'm so sorry. He doesn't mean it. He's just surprised. Come inside. We're about to have dessert." I stared at the message, then at the beautiful car I'd poured my heart and savings into. In that moment, something inside me that had been bending for decades finally broke clean through. I didn't go back inside for dessert. Instead, I walked to my truck, started the engine, and drove to the hotel where I'd booked a room for the night. The dashboard clock read 6:43 in the evening Christmas Day, still stretching endlessly ahead, though the celebration I'd anticipated was already in ruins. The hotel room was generic and impersonal beige walls, standard queen bed, mass-produced landscape artwork. But at that moment, its anonymity felt comforting compared to the charged atmosphere of my family home. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my coat, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. The look on my father's face as he called me an idiot in front of everyone. The laughter that followed. The casual way they all dismissed years of my hard work. My phone rang repeatedly, my mother calling 4 times in succession. I silenced it without answering. What was there to say? That I was fine? That it didn't matter? The lies stuck in my throat before I could even contemplate speaking them. Text messages began arriving in rapid succession. "Mother, please call me. Your father didn't mean what he said. Mother, we're all waiting for you to come back for dessert. Bethany, Dad was just surprised. Don't be so sensitive. Uncle Brian, that was a hell of a gift, kid. Real craftsmanship." I turned the phone face down on the nightstand. Their words, whether apologetic or supportive, couldn't undo what had happened. Couldn't erase the humiliation or restore my shattered hopes. The room felt suddenly claustrophobic. I grabbed the keycard and went down to the hotel bar, which was operating with a skeleton staff on Christmas evening. A few other solitary figures, travelers perhaps, or others escaping family gatherings, sat scattered around the dimly lit space. I ordered a whiskey neat and found a corner booth. As the alcohol warmed my system, my thoughts began to clarify rather than blur. For 32 years, I had been measuring myself against a standard I could never meet. My father's approval was the mirage I'd been chasing across a desert, always visible in the distance but evaporating when approached. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, checking the account balance that had been so severely depleted by the Mustang purchase. Then I scrolled through photos from work, my crew restoring power after hurricanes, ice storms, floods. Images of us working through the night to keep hospitals running, ensuring elderly residents didn't freeze during winter outages, bringing entire communities back online when they were at their most vulnerable. What my father and sister didn't understand, had never bothered to understand, was that my work wasn't just climbing poles. It was about keeping critical infrastructure functioning. It was about being the difference between life and death during emergencies. It required technical knowledge, physical courage, and unwavering focus under extreme conditions. The whiskey glass empty, I ordered another and continued my digital journey through my life. Photos of my house, not as grand as my parents' colonial or Bethany's prospective brownstone, but comfortable, paid for with honest work, situated on land with towering oak trees and a stream running along the back property line. Pictures of friends from my crew at barbecues, fishing trips, celebrating birthdays. People who respected me, valued my skills, enjoyed my company without constant comparisons or criticism. Around 11, my phone rang again. My mother, persistent as always. This time, I answered. "Harley? Thank goodness. We've been so worried." "I'm fine, Mom. Just needed some space." "Your father feels terrible," she said. The lie transparent even through the phone. You know how he gets when he's surprised. He didn't mean those things. "Yes, he did," I replied, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "He's always meant them. That's the problem." "That's not true. He's proud of you, in his way. He just doesn't understand your choices. He's never tried to understand them. There's a difference." A heavy sigh from her end. "Will you come back tomorrow for breakfast? Give him a chance to apologize?" I almost laughed at the idea of my father apologizing. In 32 years, I'd never heard him admit being wrong about anything. "I'll think about it," I said, knowing even as I spoke that my decision was already forming. After hanging up, I ordered a third whiskey and opened my email. I found the original bill of sale for the Mustang, confirming what I already knew: the car was still legally mine. I had planned to complete the title transfer tomorrow as part of the gift. The temporary registration was in the glove compartment, still in my name. At 1 in the morning I called Jake, waking him from a sound sleep. "Dude, it's Christmas," he groaned. "I need a favor," I said, explaining the situation in brief, emotionless sentences. Jake was silent for a moment after I finished. "That's rough, man. Really rough. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I take back what's mine and stop trying to buy approval I'll never get." "About time," Jake said, surprising me with his vehemence. "We've all watched you bend over backwards for years trying to please people who don't appreciate you. What do you need from me?" We talked through logistics for 15 minutes. Jake agreed to meet me at my parents' house early the next morning with his truck and car trailer. He'd bring the spare key to the Mustang that we'd kept during the restoration process. Next, I called my supervisor, Thomas, apologizing for the late hour. "Everything okay?" he asked, immediately concerned. "Yeah, just family stuff," I replied. "Remember that promotion you mentioned last month? The regional supervisor position? Is it still available?" "Absolutely. Been holding it for you. Hoping you'd reconsider. It's yours if you want it." "I want it," I said decisively. "And I'm ready to relocate if necessary." "That's great news," Thomas said, the smile evident in his voice. "We can talk details when you're back from holiday break. It'll mean a significant pay bump and more administrative responsibilities, just so you know." "Perfect," I said. "One more thing, do you still have connections with that technical training program at the community college, the one that helps disadvantaged kids learn trades?" "Sure do. My brother runs it." "Why?" "I might have a donation for them, a teaching tool for the automotive program." By 3 in the morning, my plan was fully formed. I set my alarm for 6, then lay down fully clothed on top of the hotel bed covers. Sleep seemed impossible, but exhaustion eventually overtook me, and I drifted off with a strange sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The alarm's insistent beeping woke me to grim determination rather than anxiety. I showered quickly, dressed in clean work clothes, and checked out of the hotel. The morning was cold but clear, the rising sun casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape. Jake was already waiting a block from my parents' house when I arrived, his truck idling with the car trailer attached. He handed me a coffee and the spare Mustang key. "You sure about this?" he asked, his breath visible in the cold morning air. "More sure than I've been about anything in a long time," I replied, taking a sip of the hot coffee. "Wait here, I'll bring the car around." The neighborhood was still quiet as I approached my parents' house, the early morning sun glinting off windows and fresh snow. Most families would be sleeping in after Christmas celebrations, but I knew my father would be awake. His military-ingrained habit of rising at 5:30, regardless of the occasion, was as predictable as his disappointment in me. I walked up the driveway, past my father's sensible sedan and my mother's SUV, to where the Mustang sat gleaming in the weak winter sunlight. For a moment, I just stood admiring it, the perfect lines, the immaculate restoration, all the hours of work and care that had gone into making it exactly right. The key slid into the door lock smoothly. I opened the driver's side door, settled into the leather seat, and inserted the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life with a deep, satisfying rumble that seemed to vibrate through the quiet neighborhood. I hadn't even backed out of the driveway when the front door flew open. My father emerged, still in his bathrobe and slippers, hair disheveled from sleep. His face registered confusion, then recognition, then anger in rapid succession. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, hurrying down the front steps without bothering to close the door behind him. I rolled down the window but kept the engine running. "I'm taking back what's mine." "This is ridiculous," he sputtered, reaching the car and placing his hand on the door. "You gave this to me as a gift. You can't just take it back because your feelings got hurt." "Actually, I can," I replied calmly. "The car is still registered in my name. I never completed the title transfer. Legally, it's mine." His face reddened. "This is childish, Harley. Absolutely childish." "Is this because of what I said yesterday? You know, I was just surprised." "Your mother says I should apologize, so fine, I apologize. Now stop this nonsense." The non-apology hung in the air between us. Through the open front door, I could see my mother and Bethany appearing in the hallway, drawn by the commotion. They hurried outside, hastily wrapped in robes against the morning chill. "Harley, what's happening?" my mother asked, her voice tinged with alarm. "I'm taking the Mustang," I replied simply. "But you gave it to your father," Bethany protested. "You can't just take back a gift." "Watch me," I said, then turned my attention back to my father. "For 32 years I've been trying to earn your respect. Yesterday made it very clear that's never going to happen." "This is about respect?" my father scoffed. "You want respect, you earn it. Not by climbing poles or buying expensive toys, but by making something of yourself. By using your mind instead of just your hands." Something shifted inside me, not anger, but clarity. I turned off the engine and stepped out of the car, standing at my full height, several inches taller than my father. For the first time, I noticed how he had aged, how the confident professor had begun to shrink into an old man, clinging to hierarchies and credentials to maintain his sense of superiority. "Let me tell you about what I actually do for a living, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "I don't just climb poles. I maintain and repair critical infrastructure that keeps entire communities functioning. During that ice storm last winter, my team and I worked 72 hours straight in below-freezing temperatures to restore power to 3 counties, including 2 hospitals and 6 nursing homes." I took a step closer to him. "While you were annoyed about your 6-hour outage, I was hanging 40 feet in the air on an icy pole, manually reconnecting lines carrying 13,000 volts, knowing that a single mistake would mean death. Not just for me, but potentially for anyone counting on that power for medical equipment." My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father's expression remained unmoved, but something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps. "You think I make minimum wage climbing poles? Last year I made $122,000 with overtime and hazard pay. That's more than many of your assistant professors with their PhDs. I own my house outright, no mortgage. I have 0 debt and a 6-figure investment portfolio." By now, several neighbors had emerged from their houses, curious about the early morning confrontation. I could see Uncle Brian's car pulling up across the street, his concerned face visible through the windshield. "The promotion I was offered last month, the one I just accepted last night, comes with a 30% salary increase and responsibility for power grid management across 4 states. I supervise 27 technicians and coordinate with state and federal agencies during natural disasters." I gestured toward the Mustang. "This car represents 6 months of overtime shifts and thousands of hours of restoration work. I didn't go into debt for it. I earned every penny and every moment that went into making it perfect." My father's face had lost some of its color. Behind him, Bethany's expression had shifted from annoyance to something more complex. "You called me an idiot in front of our entire family," I continued, my voice remaining calm but carrying enough to reach the small audience that had gathered. "You mocked my career, a career that saves lives, that keeps communities functioning during their darkest hours. You laughed at me for climbing poles without having the faintest idea what my job actually entails or what skills it requires." Uncle Brian had joined us now, standing slightly apart from the family group, his expression supportive. "The truth is, Dad, I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need to prove my worth to you or anyone else in this family. I know what I contribute to society. I know the value of my work." I turned to the gathered neighbors and extended family members. This car was meant to be a gift, a way to fulfill a dream my father had. But I've realized it's not right to give such a meaningful gift to someone who holds such contempt for how it was earned. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Instead, I've arranged to donate this car to the technical education program at Essex Community College. They'll use it to train disadvantaged young people in automotive restoration skills. Kids who might not have the opportunity for a fancy university education, but who have the talent and dedication to build valuable careers with their hands and minds together. My father's face flushed dark red. "You can't be serious." "This is my car," I interrupted firmly. "My choice." Uncle Brian stepped forward, extending his hand to me. "That's a hell of a donation, Harley. Those kids will learn a lot from a restoration of this quality." I shook his hand, noting the grease permanently embedded in the creases of his fingers, marks of a lifetime of honest work, just like my own calloused hands. "Thanks, Uncle Brian. I appreciate that." I turned back to my father, whose expression had frozen in a mixture of anger and disbelief. "The tow truck will be here any minute to take the Mustang." I've left the car cover in the trunk. It should keep it protected until it reaches the college." As if on cue, Jake pulled around the corner in his truck, the car trailer rattling behind him. The gathered neighbors watched in silence as he parked at the curb and got out, nodding respectfully to the assembled family. "You're making a mistake," my father said, his voice low. "This childish tantrum will accomplish nothing." "Actually," I replied, "it's already accomplished everything I needed. For the first time in my life, I see our relationship clearly. I'm done seeking approval from someone who's never going to give it." I turned to my mother, whose eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I love you, Mom, but I won't be at any more family gatherings where my work and my choices are treated as jokes. You're always welcome at my house, but I'm done coming here to be humiliated." I walked back to the Mustang, started the engine again, and carefully backed it out of the driveway. Jake had positioned the trailer perfectly, and with practiced ease, I guided the classic car up the ramps and secured it for transport. As I climbed down from the trailer, Uncle Brian approached me again. "Been a long time coming," he said quietly. "Proud of you, kid." We shook hands again, and I felt the simple gesture heal something that words couldn't touch. Without looking back at the house or the family still standing in shocked silence in the driveway, I climbed into the passenger seat of Jake's truck. As we pulled away, I didn't feel the regret or doubt I had expected. Instead, a profound sense of liberation washed over me, the unburdening of expectations I had never been able to meet and shouldn't have been trying to meet in the first place. For the first time in my adult life, I was driving away from my father's disappointment instead of toward his approval, and the road ahead looked clearer than it ever had before. The January morning dawned clear and cold as I pulled into the parking lot of Essex Community College. Jake followed in his truck, the Mustang gleaming on the trailer behind him. Professor Miller, the automotive program director, waited by the technical building's service entrance, his breath visible in the frigid air. "Mr. Wilson," he greeted me warmly, extending a gloved hand. "When Thomas called to tell me about your donation, I could hardly believe it. This is going to be an incredible learning opportunity for our students." Students had already begun to gather, mostly young men and women in their late teens and early 20s, bundled against the cold but eyes bright with excitement as they spotted the Mustang. Their instructor, a gray-haired man with permanently oil-stained hands named Frank, began organizing them to help unload the car. "Most of these kids come from backgrounds where college wasn't an option," Professor Miller explained as we watched them work. "But they have natural mechanical talent. This program gives them marketable skills and a path to good jobs." I thought about my own path, so different from what my father had envisioned, but perfectly aligned with my abilities and passions. That's exactly why I wanted the car to come here. The students' enthusiasm was contagious as they carefully guided the Mustang off the trailer and into the shop. Their questions came rapid-fire once the car was secured about the restoration process, the engine specifications, the historical details we'd preserved. "Would you mind talking to them about the restoration?" Frank asked. Hearing from someone who's actually completed a project of this caliber would mean a lot. For the next 2 hours, I walked the students through every aspect of the restoration, the challenges, the research required, the specialized techniques. Their questions were thoughtful and specific, showing genuine interest and technical understanding. "This is the kind of car people dream about working on," said a young woman named Alicia, running her hand reverently along the fender. "Most of us never get our hands on something this special." "Now you all will," I replied. "And when you're done learning from it, you can help restore it to this condition again for the next class." As I prepared to leave, Professor Miller handed me an official donation receipt. "This is valued at $32,000 based on our appraiser's assessment. Quite generous of you, Mr. Wilson." I folded the paper without looking at it. The tax deduction meant nothing compared to seeing the excitement on those students' faces, young people who, like me, found their calling in working with their hands. Back at work the following week, news of my promotion spread quickly. My crew organized an impromptu celebration during lunch break, complete with a cake reading. "Congrats on the fancy office job in blue frosting." "Don't worry," Kevin joked, slapping me on the back. "We'll still let you climb poles occasionally so you don't get soft behind that desk." "You better," I laughed. "Can't have my skills getting rusty." The truth was, the new position blended the best of both worlds. I'd still be in the field during major events, but I'd also be applying my extensive practical knowledge to improve systems and train new technicians. For the first time, I felt fully recognized for both my physical capabilities and my intelligence. My phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "This is your Uncle Brian. Got your number from your mom. Wanted to tell you I quit the body shop at Martin's. Starting my own restoration business. Your Mustang work inspired me to finally take the leap. Want to grab a beer sometime?" I smiled and texted back immediately. Family connections worth keeping were becoming clearer every day. A week later, my mother called. Her voice sounded different, stronger somehow. "Your father and I had a long talk," she said without preamble. "Several long talks, actually. What you said, it made an impact, though he'd never admit it directly." "Mom, you don't have to." "No, let me finish," she interrupted. "I've spent too many years making excuses for him, trying to bridge gaps that he created. I told him I wouldn't do it anymore. That if he wants a relationship with his son, he needs to make the effort himself." I sat down, genuinely surprised by the firmness in her voice. That couldn't have been an easy conversation. "It wasn't," she admitted, "but it was overdue. Very overdue." 3 days after that call, Bethany reached out. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our home's neutral territory for what proved to be an awkward but necessary conversation. "I owe you an apology," she said after we'd exchanged pleasantries. "I've been Dad's echo chamber for years. It was easier than standing up to him." "You were always his ideal," I replied without bitterness. "It's a hard position to risk." She stared into her coffee cup. "Maybe, but it doesn't excuse not defending my brother." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I never really understood what you do, how important it is. I just parroted Dad's dismissals. Most people don't understand until their power goes out," I said with a small smile. By March, I was settled into my new role, with its increased responsibilities and uncomfortable amount of paperwork. My crew continued to treat me the same equal parts respect and good-natured ribbing which kept me grounded. The calls and texts from my father started about a month after Christmas, first angry, then demanding, finally tapering into strained attempts at normal conversation. I responded politely but briefly, neither encouraging nor completely shutting down communication. Boundaries, I was learning, didn't require burning bridges. In early April, my office phone rang with a call from reception. "There's a Victor Wilson here to see you. Says he's your father." My heart skipped a beat. "Send him up." My father looked out of place in the industrial setting of the power company headquarters, his tweed jacket and leather briefcase at odds with the practical, rugged surroundings. He stood awkwardly in my office doorway, taking in the wall of certificates, safety awards, and technical diagrams. "Your mother suggested I might find you here," he said by way of greeting. "I was in the area for a conference." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Have a seat." He sat stiffly, placing his briefcase on the floor beside him. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. "Your office is impressive," he finally offered. "I didn't realize the scope of your operation here. Would you like a tour?" I asked, surprising both of us with the offer. Something that might have been relief flickered across his face. "Yes, I think I would." For the next hour, I showed him around the facility, the control room with its wall of monitors tracking power distribution across 4 states, the equipment, warehouse, the training center where new technicians learned their craft. I introduced him to colleagues who greeted me with obvious respect. As we watched a training session on emergency response protocols, my father cleared his throat. "Your mother tells me you donated that Mustang to a technical college program." "Yes," I replied simply. "That was." He paused, seeming to search for the right word. "That was a generous thing to do." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a direct acknowledgement of what had happened at Christmas. But coming from my father, it was something a small crack in the wall of judgment he had built between us. "Those students will learn a lot from it," I said. Another pause. Perhaps I could too. I glanced at him, unsure of his meaning. "Learn things," he clarified awkwardly. "About your work, what you actually do." It wasn't much, but it was a beginning, not of the relationship I had spent decades fruitlessly pursuing, but of something new, something based on reality rather than expectations. The chasm between us wouldn't be closed in a day, or maybe ever completely. But for the first time, there seemed to be a willingness to at least acknowledge its existence. That night, alone in my house, I reflected on the journey of the past few months. The humiliation of Christmas Day had been painful, but it had also been the catalyst for a profound change. In losing the desperate need for my father's approval, I had gained something far more valuable: self-respect and a clear understanding of my own worth. Success, I had learned, wasn't measured by degrees on a wall or approval from others. It was found in work that mattered, in the respect of peers who understood that work's value, and in the courage to stand up for oneself, even against the most deeply ingrained patterns. The journey wasn't over. Family relationships are never simple, and decades of damage couldn't be repaired overnight. But for the first time in my life, I was moving forward on my own terms, carrying the power that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you contribute to the world. Has someone in your family ever dismissed your career or life choices? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by others' approval. Remember, true power comes from within, not from climbing poles, but from standing tall in your own truth. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.